Much for joining us today. A little bit about me and what I'm doing and the talk that I'm going to give today. So I come from Hoxton Hall, as I was so wonderfully introduced. I came into the Activate project when it had already kind of been granted by the Heritage Fund. So I came into this project that had already been started, it had already been written out, and I came in as a theatre director who has a kind of specialism in transdisciplinary arts, but also my thesis was all around female archive. So I'm sure all of you are archive experts, I'm assuming. But the thing that interests me about female archives specifically is that as we start to go back in history, we kind of lose a bit of female voice. So it becomes this piecing together sometimes of photos and memories and images and artwork rather than necessarily a pure narrative. And that's the way that I've decided to come into this talk today. As has been mentioned, we have an amazing book that is being launched next week, which is the first definitive history of Hoxton Hall from start to finish. And I was like, I could go to this book, which I only got a copy of last week, and give you kind of a step-by-step guide. But actually, that's not the journey at all that I've been on as leading this project. I have been piecing it together all on my own. Now I have a wonderful resource, but today I'm going to present to you the way that I've approached this project, through oral histories, through delving through the archives here, and through rooting through different cupboards at the hall, as we shall see. So literally opening cupboards and finding stacks and stacks and stacks of photos. I'm just going to move this. There you go. Perfect. So, Hoxton Hall. When people think of Hoxton Hall, I don't know, can I see a raise of hands to people that have actually been to Hoxton Hall? That would be really useful. Okay, so most people have been to Hoxton Hall. Great, so you're not starting on most people, that's fine. So we're mostly starting on a kind of equal footing. It's a beautiful music hall. It's one of only 4 in the country surviving. Yeah, it's grade 2 listed, and it's really special, as we shall come to see, because not only does it still function as a music hall and as a music venue and a theatre venue, but it also functions as a space for the community. And that's the way that I have explored Hoxton Hall. But first of all, of course, music hall. So, here we go. I have one of our first flyers from McDonald's Music Hall. Now, Hoxton Hall was actually only a music hall for 7 years. It lost its liquor licence. So no one wanted to go to the music hall after that. Yeah? So one of the people that we have, although Sue has been sending me lots of new female performers that we will be exploring later in the project, is Catty King. Now, Catty King might be familiar to you because she's one of the women that is buried at Abney Cemetery with the Abney Earth project that's been happening. I don't know how many of you know about that. So we have Catty King, and we have a talk that is in the works with Deborah Jeffries that's going to happen next year, where we start to explore different performers. But a little bit about Catty King. I'm sure some people will know more than me. So she was a music hall performer that did burlesque, and she was also known for dressing in men's clothing and performing turns or songs. She was married to John Mortimer, who was a playwright of the time. There we go, gorgeous. And I have a very limited musical history, so this is one of the things that I'm learning, but I always imagine, did anyone see the TV show Tipping the Velvet? Yeah, so some of that is based, or read the book actually, some of that is based at the Britannia, which is just down the road. Unfortunately, it got bombed during the Blitz, but yeah, so that's a little reference to one of our famous music hall performers. Another famous music hall performer that everybody talks about when they talk about music hall is, can anyone guess? Marie Lloyd, exactly. Now, there are so many rumours about Marie Lloyd performing absolutely everywhere. Even through my own personal associations, I had my grandma told me that her mum's godmother was Marie Lloyd, Who knows? You know, they lived in riverboats on the canal. So there is there's a strong connection to the East End there. There's a possibility, but I have the feeling that she was lots of people's godmother. I also had an amazing oral history with a woman that lives just round the back in the estates, and she said that Marie Lloyd is apparently her grandmother or her great-grandmother. So there we go. Who knows? So there are links. And we do know that the Fairy Bell Troupe performed at Hoxton Hall in its kind of early iterations, which was when Marie Lloyd was performing with her family as a young child. So we do have a reference there. However, we do have many copies of Mary Lloyd that have appeared at Hoxton Hall. So I found about 3 or 4 different shows in the archives, all dedicated to Marie Lloyd. And I'm really sorry, this is the best picture I could get. I don't know if anyone saw our East End girl, Jessie Wallace. Every single headline is East End girl. Did a TV show about 15 years ago, all about Marie Lloyd, and it was filmed at Hoxton Hall. So, in some ways, Marie Lloyd has performed. And I've got a little photo here of something I found just the other day, hence the fact it hasn't been scanned, of Our Marie, which was a show by the Gaslight Gaieties, which performed at Hoxton Hall in the 1970s. So in some ways, Marie Lloyd lives at Hoxton Hall. She lives on, but never in an actual practical kind of sense. Gorgeous. So, my Hoxton Hall women aren't based around performance. My Hoxton Hall women are dedicated to the other side of Hoxton Hall, which is this kind of community sense that runs through all the way through to today. And it's very important, as we will see, because it's really focused and based around women. So let me show you our initial list that I came to. So these are our key women. You might have heard of some of them. So we've got Sarah Ray, the Girls' Guild for Good Life, Olive Marbury, Estelle Stead, the Queen Mary Hostel / Queen Mary, May Scott and Chris Bowler. These are the women that we have been given to explore and celebrate through this project. And as we are just in the co-discover phase, I'm going to show you some of the things that I have discovered through the archives and as we go forward through oral histories. And then we'll see where that has led to. So let's start at the beginning. Sarah Ray. So here we have Sarah Ray with her husband, who was the secretary of the Blue Ribbon Temperance Society, which started at Hoxton Hall in 1978. So after the hall was a music hall, it kind of fell into disuse for a little bit. And then the Blue Ribbon Army came and saw an opening. So they came and took over the main hall space. So at this time, it was just the hall. Sarah Ray was inspired to start the Girls' Guild for Good Life. Now, there were lots of these kind of different groups all around Hackney and around London at this time. And Sarah Ray said that she was inspired by the works of W.E. Stead. Does anyone know W.E. Stead? Yes, no, yeah. So he became very famous for a scandalous journalistic inquiry that happened, where he was exploring the white slave trade. So there was women that were being sent abroad from London and sold into the sex slave. And he actually ended up buying a young girl and got arrested for it and went to prison for quite some time. But what it did is highlight the need for support for working class women and the need to maybe create a space where they can feel safe and hang out away from, well, Hoxton used to be known as the Piccadilly Circus. I heard this. Have you heard this before? The Piccadilly Circus of the East End. It had lots of different theatres, yeah. Because it had all the theatres, right? We had the Britannia down the road. Don't think Curtin was still going. But you also had so many different ale houses and things like that the Temperance Society came in and decided that they needed to save the working class people. We will look into that a little bit later. But she was inspired to start the Girls Guild for Good Life. And it started with just a series of different classes, so bootmaking and cooking and sewing, and I'm imagining a little bit of writing in there as well. And this brought in some other women along the way. So I said we weren't going to talk about performers, but actually there you go, that's Hoxton Street in 1903, that's as close as I could get. So here we have a little clip as well, just to highlight that. This is a little clipping about the Girls Guild for Good Life, with Sarah Ray talking about why she started. And there's the Girls Guild. So they're standing outside with their certificates, I'm imagining, for good behaviour. Olive Malvery. So Olive Malvery started as a performer doing epic poetry, which was, she would perform stories about her homeland in India, myths and legends, alongside a pianist. And she got really interested in the work that the Girls Guild was doing. And she decided to go undercover and discover what life was like for the working women of Hoxton. So here I have a couple of pictures of her in her various disguises. So we have a flour seller, and we have an organ grinder, but she also went undercover as a coffee seller, a costermonger, a street singer. She even went to the workhouse, I believe, for one night. And she collected all these stories, and she wrote her own book about it, called The Soul Market, based on a series of journalistic articles that she originally created. So that's really excited in a couple of ways, because number one, we have someone's own voice exploring exactly what she was up to. And secondly, she was a woman of mixed heritage, and she was very successful, working to her own beat of the drum, and yeah, doing good. So it's really exciting to find someone of mixed heritage in Hoxton Hall's history, because as we'll see, it doesn't appear again for a while. And that's another thing that we're trying to address with our project, because it's something that the young people talk about a lot when I address the archive. And it's really interesting to me when we can find these pockets of representation. So we have Olive Marlbury, and I also have another little picture of her, and this is her at her wedding, her lovely wedding to John McCurdy. And at her wedding, she was, as ever, a little bit of a rebel, and you can see that she's wearing a sari, which, considering this was going to be printed in the papers, was pretty, stepping out there. And she also had over 100 women from the Girls Guild at her wedding in Westminster, which is also just shows how excited she was. She continued her work. She travelled to Geneva. She travelled to New York, talking about the work that she was doing with the Girls Guild. And she also helped build Hoxton Hall. This is another theme that we find stepping through the history. We have a big kind of stone outside the original entrance to the hall, where the new wing was created, which was dedicated as a learning space. So this is if you've been to the hall, this is the back space, and the kind of studios where we do a lot of our dance classes, we do a lot of our rehearsal spaces. So she literally helped build Hoxton Hall. However, the McCurdy room, which it refers to, I can't find it. I've gone through the archives, I've been through all of the different records of the hall and its iterations, and as far as I can tell, it only exists in stone. So this is a mystery that I'm really keen to explore in the project. Where is the McCurdy room? Where is this room that Olive built for the hall? Yes, we have Estelle Stead. So Estelle Stead is W.E. Stead's daughter. So Estelle Stead comes into the story a little later in W.E. Stead's story. So, alongside being a journalist, W.E. Stead was a spiritualist. Now, we don't think any spiritualism was happening at the hall because it was run at this point by the Quakers. So we don't have a history of spiritualism in there. However, because the Girls' Guild was dedicated to the memory of W.E. Stead, Estelle Stead also has a stone in the hostel that is built next door, the Queen Mary Hostel, which was pushed forward by Sarah Ray. Estelle Stead has come to prominence for writing books around her father. I'm very aware that in a history of women, I keep on coming back to a man, but that is what she based a lot of her working life around and what a lot of the archive comes from. So another famous thing about W.E. Stead that he's known for is predicting his own passing. He predicted that he would die, so it was very exciting. It was a very exclusive event. And the hostel opened. We are going to talk, as I said, more about these women that we don't have names for, these kind of unknown women that come up in the hostel and in the Girls' Guild. But just to say, we do have some records of life in the hostel. We know, for instance, that they were invited to many kind of musical evenings. We only have one side of the correspondence coming from that. We also have lists of some of the women and the jobs that they were doing. We are going to run a project on this. So also I'm holding back on doing a lot of my research. Currently, Hoxton Works exists where Queen Mary Hostel is, which is, we'll talk about it, but it's a space which hosts different artistic kind of groups, including Cardboard Citizens, which works with people that have experienced homelessness. So our plan is that we're going to do a project looking back into the archives of these women that lived at the hostel and making a piece of work that will delve towards our exhibition happening in May 2027 alongside the designer who's just sat over there. You say hello, Thomas. Hello. Sorry, I have to give you a little shout out. Gorgeous. So we have our hostel opening. Now we have May Scott. So again, I'm aware that I'm taking a big jump forward, but I really want to give you the history of Hoxton Hall through the eyes of these women that we're celebrating. So this is our one and only photo of May Scott. In the first print of Pseudos, and actually quite a few of you helped put together the Women of Hackney book, we had no photo of May Scott. But eventually we rustled this one out of the woodwork. We've also recently found some footage of May Scott at a gala, going and sitting in the front row. And we also, I believe, in the archives have an oral history from May Scott that we shall hopefully be releasing online at some point in the near-ish future. So, May Scott. So May Scott came to Hoxton Hall in the 1940s during the Second World War. She started helping out. So I don't know how many of you know that Hoxton Hall was actually used as an air raid shelter during the war. So she helped kind of support, she was a community support officer essentially, so helping people come downstairs and making sure that they felt safe. And that was a real theme in May Scott's tenure at Hoxton Hall, where she stayed on until 1974, after becoming warden in 1957. Now, around this time, Hoxton Hall's Girls' Guild started to disapparate. However, there were still lots of girls and women coming to use the hall. So here I have some photos of some of the groups that I've taken a hasty snap of. So I've got some pictures of some brownies and some of the girls' groups that were still using the hall. And I also have this amazing picture, which I really love, specifically the artwork above. I don't know what's happened to it, but it really reminds me of some of the artwork that's kind of just over the road in one of the kind of working clubs. So I'm hoping to see if we can kind of match that up. Yeah. Here we go. And as you can see, she started to open the stage up. It was a really key time in Hoxton's history because the community was changing. It wasn't such a Christian community anymore. So it needed to change with the times, and that was the thing that May Scott really helped usher in. She noticed what was happening and what was needed in the community. So what was needed was kids groups, places for kids to go after school as more parents were working. Young mothers, where were they going to go? Where were they going to necessarily find out and have a place to hang out? But as the houses were getting smaller and houses had been knocked down, Hoxton was severely bombed during the war. And she recognised the need for these spaces. And she ushered in this new age of theatre. She got Shakespearean actors to come and do plays and teach the kids. There's a wonderful story that I found out recently through an oral history and have then found through the archives. So a wonderful fellow called Frederick came in and was like, I knew May Scott. And he came to Hoxton Hall in 1971 as part of a UN incentive summer school. So they would come and just sleep in the hall, so literally sleeping in Hoxton Hall, just on the stage. And then they would teach the young kids by day. And these kids, I think, were troublesome. I've got it's not a wonderful story, but it is a little bit funny of them. They used to hold competitions to see how many fire trucks they could get to come when they set alight to different market traders' stalls. So awful, but I said this to someone that lived in Hackney in the 1960s and 70s, and they said, oh yeah, we used to do that too. And I was like, okay, so this was common practice. It was like, well, fair enough. But they kept coming, and the kids really responded to May and the way that she looked after them, she cared for them, the way she was she was grounded, she kept herself to herself. We don't know that much about her, but we do know the impact she left. Now, during this summer, there was also, I'm hoping I got the year right actually, there was also a big trial happening around the corner at Shoreditch Courts for the Cray brothers. And he remembered these big dark cars pulling up outside Hoxton Hall and these young men in suits and glasses strolling through the door looking for May Scott, just to pay their respects and say, check me out, I've made it. And I think, again, that just shows the impact that May Scott had, that although there was this big, really important thing happening around the corner, what they really wanted to do is show May that they'd made it, in a manner of speaking. I've got a little picture here, so just so you can see what was happening. So this is an amazing picture. So does anyone know Hoxton Street that well? So does anyone know what is here now? I've got my opinions on what now exists there.
No, the free flow.
Yeah, I think it's the gardens. Yeah, but you can see how much Hoxton has changed, and just how wonderful that garden is. The garden opened in 1982. And you can see that this is May Scott's vision, an inner city centre offering positive alternatives for everyone. I love this, and you'll see this woman pop up again and again. But you can see how May Scott was constantly thinking about the future. And you can see actually there's a place here called the Stewart Hall, which is now called the May Scott Studio, after May Scott. Because when people come to Hoxton Hall to this day, they still call it May's, which I think is quite amazing. It's known as May's Place. And part of my job is to kind of capture these histories and find ways to preserve them. As we still have them, we can start looking at the archive in new ways. She also opened up lunch clubs and pensioners clubs. You can see the tea dances with people dressed up, and also this lovely mix of ages, and you can see just how imperative Hoxton Hall was to everyone. And actually this picture is from Christmas lunch, the one that they're all sat at dinner. So we don't do a Christmas lunch anymore. There are incentives that are still happening, for instance, at Jackson's Lane, but it's a really wonderful thing that they recognised the loneliness that existed in the community and made a space for people to come together. we've also got a little bit of May Scott's writing. She writes a lot. There's a lot of reports and histories that May Scott wrote in the archives. But I think this is really nice that not only was she doing all of this, going off, studying, but she was also finding the time to write leaflets about the history of Hoxton Hall, and shows how much she loved it. Next, big old jump forward to Chris Bowler. Now, Chris Bowler, she came to Hoxton Hall as a guardian in 1990, but it was not the first time that she'd been at Hoxton Hall. She performed at Hoxton Hall in the late 70s as part of the Monstrous Regiment. Now, I don't know if people are theatre buffs, but Monstrous Regiment is big on the feminist theatre scene. It consisted of big players such as Carol Churchill, who was another Hackney lass, my osteopath mum, I would like to think, who actually knew Chris Bowler. When I mentioned Hoxton Hall, the first thing he said to me was, Chrissy Bowler. So she was also another loved person, but maybe a little bit more formidable. And she really enjoyed kind of subverting expectations. There's a wonderful quote and story that she talks about when they were touring Monstrous Regiment all around, not only the UK, but also Europe, where they turned up on a sweltering hot day and they just knew that to put the show on that evening, they had to build a set. So they all stripped down to their bikinis and started building. And all of the people in the village were just looking very confused and very askance at these women just there with their hammers hammering away in bikinis. But afterwards, when they spoke to the local people, they were just really surprised that they weren't in overalls. They were like, we weren't expecting a feminist theatre group to not be looking like what you imagined a feminist theatre group to be. And I really love that fact that she encompassed the whole scope of femininity without falling into one particular realm. So, Hoxton Hall in the 1990s. By now, we had a new entrance. So in 1982, the same time as the community gardens, there was a big change and a big refurb where they opened the current front of the house that we have today. It's a little bit more bright and a little bit more noticeable. I don't know if people have walked past Hoxton Hall. The first time I went to Hoxton Hall, I walked past it. But we're changing that. We are in the middle of a big architectural change as part of connecting Hoxton, and part of our task as Activate is looking at how we can work with the architects to make the front be a little bit more inviting. Now, the other interesting thing I find about this photo is Hoxton Hall Garden Festival. Hoxton Hall Garden Festival. Does anyone who's been in Hackney a little bit longer than me know Hoxton Hall Garden Festival? No? What about Hoxton Hall Women's Day celebrations? No? I have piles of photos and programs of everything that was happening at Hoxton Hall in the 1990s. And one of the things that's really stood out to me is this garden festival. And in fact, we are looking to bring back the garden festival for 2027. We are putting on a May Day festival on the 31st of May as part of Hackney History Festival this year to kind of test the water and see how it goes. But the dream is that at some point we can bring back Hoxton Hall Garden Festival, because it shows once again just how ingrained Hoxton Hall was in the community. Here we have them dancing, I believe, and now you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, in Shoreditch Park. Do we think it's Shoreditch Park? I was trying to work it out. Or it could be London Fields actually. If anyone can help me, it would be much approved. Do you think it's Shoreditch Park? That's my first thought, but I'm opening it up to discussion. Another park, I think I know where this one is because I used to live right next door. So Hoxton Hall Constructions, Hoxton Hall leaves the building. I think this is Victoria Park, like right at the back. Yeah, you can kind of see that row of amazing houses that I believe, Yes, there you go, because I saw it the other day in a talk that you gave, and I was like, there you go. So Hoxton Hall Constructions, I mean, it's incredible. It's a really fun way of thinking about art and bringing art out into the community. I would love, imagine if you walked past a park now and you saw this. I would definitely stop and want to find out a little bit more. So these are the things that Chris Bowler was doing at Hoxton Hall. We can see again, this is in the gardens. I've got more pictures so I can tell that this is what's happening. And then she also put in place the music studios. We have 2 music studios at Hoxton Hall that are still in use, and we still have young people coming in daily to use. So that was all Chris Bowler. She also is the person that brought in Hoxton Works. Now, by this time, Queen Mary Hostel, remember Queen Mary Hostel, had fallen into disrepair. It had briefly become a nurses' hostel for a little bit, but by the 1990s, mid-1990s, it had become, well, it hadn't become nothing. I found lots of letters in the archives about the fact that it was homing squatters. Squatters that believed that they were giving quite a lot to the community, and there's this big back and forth because Hoxton Hall was on its knees by this point. It was doing educational things and promoting itself as a really leading light in kind of grassroots theatre and arts work. It had been doing it from the 1970s, but it needed a more capable and reliable way to be making money alongside the community work that it was doing. So she ushered through, and it managed to make it work. That in 2004, Hoxton Works opened. Here we go. Now I have some photos of women I don't know the names of. And this is one of the things that's felt really key throughout this entire project. I had an amazing writing residency come in with me last year, and it was something that she instantly picked up on as well. She was like, we've got so many photos, and we're talking boxes and boxes. I'm opening cupboards, I'm seeing more pictures of women from community projects, just snaps and snaps. These are just some of my favourites from the 1990s, the 1970s, the 1960s. We've got sewing classes, we've got luncheon clubs, we've got dancing, we've got a garden party, we've got the market, but we don't have names for them. And this is something that I'm finding kind of wonderful in the project. It's sad that we don't have their names, but these are the women that really made Hoxton Hall what it is today in their own right. They're the people that came and enjoyed and week after week built Hoxton Hall into a space. Yeah. How can we do this? So different ways of approaching these unknown women and these women that we don't know the names of. They come in different ways. So just last Wednesday we held a Strictly Hoxton. I don't know if anyone's been to Strictly Hoxton. It is a full-on showcase, cabaret and lunch club that we still hold at Hoxton Hall today. Very reminiscent of the lunch clubs that were happening in the 1960s, but with a bit more razzmatazz. And this wonderful woman came to talk to me and said, I used to bring my kids here in the 1960s and 70s. It was amazing. It was the only place, and the only place where anyone could do something. It was the only place in the area that was providing a free or a free-ish service for young people. This is something that's come up a lot. There used to be lines around the corner. There was a sweet shop next door, so the kids would go to the sweet shop and then line up to come to the youth club, which we're going to be talking about at Hackney History Festival. I'll keep plugging it. So Antonia said that one thing that she really liked was a show of Wind in the Willows. And she remembered a woman called Elsie who worked with the kids, and that was great. So I went into the archives and I found the production. So we have Wind in the Willows. We have some of the costume designs from Wind in the Willows, and who was performing in Wind in the Willows as a mole, the Ilse. So that's one way that I'm looking into trying to build a story for these women that aren't necessarily the big hitters in my project. They're big hitters to me, but they're not necessarily the big cheeses. We have the mural that you so wonderfully talked about. So this mural was painted in 1982. It was covered behind boarding for ages. I've got photos of it being covered behind boards. And then at some point they stuck mirrors on half of it. Here I have one of the women that I believe is in the mural in front of it. Now, the other day, I wasn't in, but I have her number. A woman came in and said, I helped paint that mural, I'm in it. What an amazing beginning of a project. She talked about all the different things that she did at Hoxton Hall, but she can't see herself in that mural that she painted, almost 30 years ago now. So our plan is to uncover and enjoy. You can also see a little bit of a woman here, and unfortunately the next woman is cut out, but that is Sarah, who I've heard many, many, many stories about. I also, again, have got some random YouTube footage sent to me that includes her. But I can't wait to be able to kind of bring these women to life in some way or another. Imagine an animation. That's my dream. That's the dream, but I don't know. I'm looking over at you again. I'm like, yeah. But something really important when we approach the Activate project is I have a zillion ideas and I throw things out there, but actually the groups that we're working with that I'll come to in a moment are the ones that will lead on creating the works that we do. Here we go. So that's what the mural looks like today. And this is our current girl group. We still run a girl group at Hoxton Hall. So here they are standing in front of the mirror, some of them more happy to be in the photo than others. And so we did this last summer, where we explored the hall and we started thinking about different themes that seemed important for Hoxton Hall. And they came up with the ideas of protest, seems about right, joy, loneliness and community, which are things that we're going to be exploring as the project goes along. Here's one other part. They made their own archive, memory boxes and things that they would want to be remembered for. So that's that building of their own personal archive in different ways. They're not necessarily writing their story, but they're showing things that are important to them. And they also made a dance out of it because, I'm a dancer. We also made a musical, Olive Malvery, the musical. As you can see here, you can see protest. And we also have some songs that they created thinking, Hackney Shed thinking about Olive Malvery, which is what I'm going to close on because I'm aware that time has actually flown. So I'm not going to sing it. And they did make 4, but I'll just do the opening song. So, hey, great to meet you. I really am delighted. It really is an honour to even be invited. This is a show about Hoxton Hall. Listen to the history within these walls. Warm up with a hot beverage. Hitch a ride on my horse and carriage. I want to share some knowledge about a lady called Olive. Olive went undercover. She went on a journey to discover. Her travels were multinational, her horizons international. Olive was a flower seller. She sold flowers to a fella, but I discovered something intriguing. I was believing, something deceiving. Travel on this journey with me. Take a look and you will see the history of Hoxton Hall, disguising, hiding, singing, and more. Thank you very much.